All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So first of all, good afternoon and welcome. It is wonderful to see all of you today. My name is Zane Hoyland and I am the CSU chapter Psychi president. Psychi and the Psychology Student Alliance are so thrilled to have you all join us today as we host Dr. Temple Grandin as a guest speaker. Dr. Temple Grandin is a professor of animal sciences at Colorado State University and has been with CSU for over 25 years. She is sometimes referred to as the most famous person working at CSU by her peers. When she was just 2.5 years old, she had no speech and all of the symptoms pointing towards severe autism. Early intensive speech therapy enabled her to speak by the age of 4. Her mother always encouraged her interest in art and urged her to draw many different things. Good teachers and mentors were essential for Temple's success. Her high school science teacher challenged her with the interesting projects where she had to figure out how to make things work. When studying in school became a pathway to becoming a scientist, she was motivated to study. An Emmy-winning HBO movie titled Temple Grandin was made about her life, and Temple was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame and the Academy of Arts and Sciences. Additionally, facilities that she designed handle about over half of the cattle in the United States. Some of her most famous books are the New York Times bestseller Animals in Translation, Thinking in Pictures, The Autistic Brain, and The Way I See It. Temple Grandin has been featured on 60 Minutes, has a 2010 TED Talk, and has various articles that have appeared in Time Magazine, the New York Times, and Forbes Magazine. Recently this year, Temple Grandin has been named one of the top 10 college professors in the United States and does not plan on stopping anytime soon. I have the great privilege and honor of introducing you all to the most famous person who works at CSU, Dr. Temple Grandin.
And been at CSU a long time, a professor of animal science. And when I was a little kid, I had very severe delayed speech, all the autistic behaviors. And I can't emphasize enough with little autistic kids, the importance of getting them into really good early intervention program. That is super, super important. And a lot of these little kids, they got to learn how to take turns. My speech teacher would talk to me slowly because when people talked fast, it went into gibberish. And I got really good intensive early intervention. That was super good. Now, one of the things that gets neglected in autism is sensory oversensitivity issues. They're very, very real, and they vary greatly. Some people have visual sensitivity, some have sound sensitivity, others might have touch sensitivity. I had problems with loud noise. Others might have problems with certain LED lights that flicker. And this is going to be really problematic because with the LEDs, all the fancy electronic light bulbs now, I don't know which ones flicker because I don't have that problem, but there are other people that do. So you're going to have to pick out lamps that don't flicker because that can be very, very debilitating to some people. Now, also to some people diagnosed with dyslexia. Another big problem you got with autism is once you get the kids past the little kid stage, you then got the fully verbal kids. Then you got some kids that remain nonverbal, and you've got a continuum when they grow up that goes from maybe Einstein, no speech until age 3. People can argue about whether or not he's autistic, but he'd definitely be in special ed, that's for sure. A Silicon Valley programmer to somebody who can't dress themselves, and it's all got the same name. That doesn't make very much sense. And there's getting more and more students that may be on the autism spectrum coming to CSU. And one of the things these students really need is for other students to help them, not be bullying them. When I was high school, I had a horrible, horrible time getting bullied. And the only places I was not bullied was shared interests, friends through shared interests. I cannot emphasize that enough. The big thing I'm seeing today, which I think is a big problem, is people ask me, is autism increasing? I think it's increased detection because I'm finding all these grandparents come up to me and they tell me that they discover that they're on the autism spectrum when the kids get diagnosed. But in my generation, social rules were taught in a much more structured way. Kids had paper routes. They learned how to work. I'm seeing too many students today, fully verbal, maybe good students, and they've never learned shopping. This is stuff that I was doing when I was 8 years old. They're not learning how to save money. Just very, very, very basic stuff like this. And there's a tendency to kind of don't think they can do anything. When I was out working on the center track restrainer system, if you want to see some of my stuff, you can look at grandin.com. That's my livestock webpage. You can look at that. Now the Greeley plant's got one of my restrainer systems. Fort Morgan's got one. And when I was out building these things all the time, it was Montfort's back when I was working with it all the time. I'm going to guess that 20% of the skilled welders, brilliant machinery designers, people that laid out the whole entire factory were either autistic, ADHD, or dyslexic. And I am absolutely serious. I know people in my generation have 20 patents and they own a metal fabrication company. And they're just as autistic as they come, undiagnosed, of course. This is something that kind of makes me want to pull my hair out as I go back and forth between the autism world and the livestock, building things world. And so I think most of it, it's always been here. In my generation, the kids with no speech delay just ended up getting jobs. The kids that had speech delay, they used to just throw us away. But fortunately, mother took me to a neurologist who recommended me to a speech therapy school that 2 teachers did in the basement of their house. And they were very, very good teachers. But the thing you got to be careful about with little autistic kids is you don't want to be pushing them into sensory overload. That's really bad. Sudden surprises are very scary. No, a good teacher knows just how to stretch just outside the comfort zone to get progress without causing sensory overload. And these sensory issues it's hugely variable. I think now I want to just open it up for some questions, and would that make the rest of the period just sort of be questions. And then my book, Thinking in Pictures, this is the new 25th year edition. It has a new afterword. I haven't changed anything in the book, but it has a brand new afterword with some of the latest stuff in it. And it just came out a month ago. That was another one of my COVID projects, was writing a new afterword for that. So if somebody doesn't have a question, I'm going to pick somebody. You got a job working with autistic kids. The thing is, you have to, when you work with these kids, do anything you can to engage them. Start out with little turn-taking games. If he's spinning a coin, we're going to take turns spinning the coin. Turn it into a little interactive game. And then slow down when you talk to them, but you want to get them engaged. And a good teacher knows how to really get the kid engaged. And then start teaching them words for like favorite foods or toys, something, that the child's interested in. And some kids, you can push them a bit harder than others. Others, you got to kind of sneak in their back door, because if you drive them into sensory overload, it's like the computer on a bad connection that freezes. The more you put it, the more you mess with it, the more it freezes. That's what you want to do, working with the little kids. And what I found is some teachers have the knack to work with these kids. They just have the knack. Doesn't matter whether it's ABA or it's Denver Start. And right now it's a gigantic big fight about all the different kinds of therapies, because back, years ago, there was some really bad ABA where they forced kids into sensory overload, and that was horrible. No, you absolutely don't do that. Okay, somebody asked about my squeezing machine. That's fully described in Thinking in Pictures. When I got into puberty, I started having horrendous panic attacks. And I've since found that my fear center in my brain is 3 times larger than normal. So when the hormones hit in puberty, I was like looking for danger. Imagine if you kind of lived in a war zone. Well, I wasn't living in a war zone, but my nervous system thought I was. It was sort of, that kind of situation. And I watched cattle going in the squeeze chute for their vaccinations. And they get squeezed to hold the cattle still. So I went and tried that out. And for some people, deep pressure is really calming. So I built a squeeze chute machine for myself. Another thing that helped me was deep pressure. Was a lot of exercise, hard physical exercise. A burst of hard exercise. That's another thing that helped me. Also, in thinking in pictures, I described going on a low dose of antidepressant. I have been on antidepressant medication for 40 years. The same drug, 50 milligrams of disipramine, an ancient old drug, and I don't know what would happen to me if I stopped taking it. And when I went on the medication, my colitis attacks, which were shown in the movie, stopped. And my nervous system sort of like, instead of going between 200 miles an hour and 150 miles an hour, was going maybe 75 miles an hour to 120 miles an hour. It kind of damped it down. And there's been some other individuals where a low dose of Prozac. Now, the big mistake with antidepressants is too high a dose. Throw the label away. Doesn't work. I probably have had 100 parents say, well, it worked great on a low dose. We gave him a higher dose, and he got all agitated like he drank 25 cups of coffee, and it was just horrible. And I don't know what would happen to me if I had not taken the medication. And it makes me think. And then it got switched to generic, and my insurance company had a little decide they weren't going to pay for it, and it isn't that expensive. I hope the factory continues to make this drug. It's an old drug. But you get into the whole issue about taking medication. I resisted taking the medication. I found an article about it. I was a very good researcher in the library back when you had great big telephone book-like things with the Index Medicus. And I found the paper in there, copied it on a copier, laid it aside for 2 years, kind of resisted the urge of taking medication. And then I had a super stressful eye surgery. I got a little tiny skin cancer on the margin of my lid, had to be taken off plastic surgery. You're awake, needles and knives coming, yeah, really bad. And I got really freaked out over that. And I started taking the medication. And within 3 days, it was like better living through chemistry. That's an ancient old slogan of the DuPont company from the 50s and the 60s, better living through chemistry. But I don't know what would happen to me if I hadn't taken it. Sort of really makes me think. Now the hormones are long since gone, but I'm not going to stop taking it. It has one side effect. I have to drink a lot of water. It's the only side effect. Drink lots of water. But there's some individuals, I know other individuals that have gone on low dose of Prozac or Zoloft or maybe Lexapro. Now the thing is, you'll be on it for about 3 months and you'll think, oh, it wears off. Stay on the same dose. You will cycle through the nerve cycle. Might take a couple of months, but you will cycle through the nervous cycle. Stay on the same dose. You don't want to get into escalating dose. I've been on the same dose for 40 years, this ancient old drug. Okay, the increase in diagnosis. One of the things about diagnosis, I'm trained as a neuroscientist. My PhD was in neuroscience. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. Really weird. Slaughterhouse designer trained in neuroscience. It's like really weird mixture. And I'm also a hardcore biologist. And this diagnostic stuff is not precise. It's just a behavioral profile. The other thing is, autism is a true continuous trait. There's a wonderful paper you need to read. It's called Genomic Trade-offs. Are autism and schizophrenia the steep price for a human brain? Genomic trade-offs. Are autism and schizophrenia the steep price for a human brain? The same genes, the proliferation of stem cells that make human beings have this gigantic computer sitting up here, also involved with autism and schizophrenia. It's embedded. And I had my genome is now published online. I'm going to do a data dump of my entire genome. And I'm having another test done, a fancier blood test by the Lineagen Corporation. And they were very disappointed. And 4 other journal articles were didn't like the fact that didn't find the autism genes. Yeah, I've got some of the at-risk genes, but they're the same genes that make the brain big. If you got rid of autism, you better like your computer because you won't be getting another one. You see, a brain can be more thinking, or a brain can be more social emotional. So half of the bell-shaped curve of the population is going to have a little bit of autism in varying degrees, and then you can have the social emotional people on the other side. No, they don't have any autism. But it's a true continuous trait. When do you slap a label on it? And the genomic scan did show they have a bleeding disorder. If I have a hip replacement and I get too many blood thinners, I could die. I found that out. I have really awful teeth and awful skin. I was right not to do dental implants, my jaw could have fallen apart. Those are things that showed up in the genome scan. And the anxiety genetics showed up. That was clear. But the thing is it's embedded. That paper got rejected from 4 journals. They didn't like the results. And then when you do the quick and dirty little test for autism risk, it come up with nothing. It's embedded. It's not like Down syndrome where there's a very specific problem with the genetics. How did I learn how to control my behaviors? Well, the medication helped a lot on the sound sensitivity. One of the things that can help on sound sensitivity with children, let's say the kid hates the vacuum cleaner or the hair dryer. Let the child play with it, where they turn it on and off, where they control it. Now, if you have, I don't have the problem with the flickering lights. I can use some of these cheap electronic bulbs, but there's other people who are going to hate them. The lighting things are really a bad issue for some people. And I'm concerned about the LEDs because I'm finding out that a lot of them are bad. You're probably gonna have to buy really expensive ones. Get ones that don't flicker. I had a student that had this problem years ago, and she was not autistic, she was dyslexic. And she'd get in a room with fluorescent lights and she just couldn't think. And for some people, this is really one of the most important things you could do to a classroom because I can't even buy incandescent light bulbs anymore. The old fashioned Edison bulbs, they didn't flicker. I can't even buy them anymore at King Super because I could put lamps with that and blot out the fluorescent lights. But if I can't buy them, the other thing with getting overstimulated is, you just go someplace and chill down. And there's been a lot of people talking today about masking, and you're getting burned out because it's so hard to deal with some of the sensory issues. Well, you're going to need a period to chill out. Then you do that. Now, boys have it more than girls. But I think it's always been here. You see, I worked in heavy construction for 25 years. That's like where the neuroscientist works in construction. Over there at Montfort's, over in the Montfort fab shop. JBS fixes their trucks in there now. I worked with so many, people kind of stick their nose up at the skilled trades, but we've got a problem now. I was just talking to some JBS people, and I was talking to some Cargill people this morning and JBS yesterday, and they're having problems with finding people to fix things. Yeah, because they're playing video games in the basement with an autism diagnosis. And I am serious. I like to bust up the medical model. There's too much of it. Because there's a point where on the fully verbal end of the spectrum, it's a personality variant. And then you get very severe autism, nonverbal, but some of your nonverbals can type independently. And they talk about a sensory jumbled up world and they can't control their movements. But they got a good brain in there. There's a very simple augmentative communication device you can use. It's called a tablet with the text messaging in airplane mode. And they can just type on that. And the reason why the tablet works is you don't have the attention shift problem. The print appears next to the keyboard. The other problem I see when I'm working with individuals is people overgeneralize. They go, well, what do you do with autistic kids in the classroom? Well, I don't know. Is it kindergarten, high school? What's the problem? Now, one of the problems they got is if they were a computer, they're the old Intel 286, or they're a phone with only 1 bar of service. Small processor, gigantic memory. So you got the Amazon cloud for memory, but you're accessing it through a phone with really bad self-service. And this causes a lot of problems with fast-moving social things. I can't remember long strings of verbal information. I have to have checklists. I was on an autism chat group last night. There was a girl there that got fired from a restaurant because she couldn't remember the orders verbally from 6 people at a table. I can't do that either. Waitress in a restaurant is a job I would avoid. I might be able to do the bar. I could do the hostess. That I could do. but trying to remember all those words, then they balance like 2 plates up here. Oh, that's no way. No, I have the dropped. Oh, good. So you were up there at the lamb plant. That was one of my little COVID projects this summer, was to work with the lamb plant. I worked on that, and I've got in fact, I need to talk to them about another lamb handling facility. I had a good time going up to that plant like 3 times, socially distancing, of course. Well, Madeline's talking about commonalities. Autistic kids get scared easily, and sheep get scared easily. Yeah, the sudden surprises scare. This sudden, like if you went into the yards at Colorado Lamb and you took one of those umbrellas where you press the button and go like that, well, that would scare the sheep. Guarantee you. Don't do it. Please don't do that. And it would also scare a kid with autism. Sudden, you don't want sudden changes. Yeah, that'd be one commonality. Well, maybe what we need to do is I'm going to pick somebody who's got their camera off. Let me see. I am going to pick somebody. How about Sarah Kent down on the last part of maybe you have a question. You can turn your mic on.
Yeah, I can have a question.
All right. Okay.
In the event that a child was having like an emotional breakdown due to stimulus, how would you, as like their helper, help them calm down, or would you just like stand there and let them?
Well, I'd try to take them, if it was in the classroom, I'd take them out of the classroom and take them someplace where they can calm down. And then you've got to figure out what caused that tantrum. In the 50s, we call it a tantrum. Was it sensory overload? Was it being overstimulated? Or was it not being able to talk? I sometimes would have a meltdown because I was so frustrated because I couldn't talk. That is a huge, huge, huge frustration. I knew what I wanted to say, but I just couldn't get the words out. And then sometimes a kid will pitch one just to get attention or to get out of doing something. So you got to be a really good detective and figure out what's causing that meltdown. But the first thing I'm going to look for is sensory overload. That comes first. And there's still a few people in behavior that kind of deny sensory problems. Sensory problems are real. They're evidence-based. And I've looked up brain scan data, and certain sounds just turn on the fear network in the brain, which does not happen in most people. All right, maybe we're going to pick somebody else. How about Julie Processor?
So my Zoom just kicked me out and I just now came back.
Oh, okay.
I didn't leave on purpose, I promise.
That's okay.
I'm here to listen though. I'm here to observe and just learn.
Okay, all right, but I like to get some discussion going. So what I like to do.
I have can I volunteer a question?
Yeah, sure.
So this is like kind of specific. It's about my brother who he's a couple years older than me, and he has autism, and he lived with us growing up, but lives in a group home now in the hometown we grew up in. He loves making lists, and he loves making them with me specifically. It's kind of a thing that we like to do together, but
okay.
And they're his favorite songs by all of his favorite artists, and we're now up to like 188 lists, and he has them all memorized. He won't save them. He'll just retype them over and over. And he wants me to burn CDs of all of these lists, but he updates the CDs a lot, like very often. Many of them like are too long for me to fit on one CD, but he wants one CD per list. But beyond the logistical,
He can put them on the cloud now. He doesn't need to put them on CDs.
Right. Well, that's what I'm like. We could do Spotify, but he's like, no. And he has it seems like he gets kind of rigid, and he'll obsess about these lists, and he goes through periods of time where that's the only thing that he wants to talk to me. He's 33.
Oh, okay. Well,
so he's older, yeah.
Now, does he have any job or anything that he does?
Yes, well, not right now with COVID.
Well, COVID's just messed up everything. Yeah.
Right. And he was working at I think it's called Abilities First. I don't think it was honestly. I don't think it's the most cognitively engaging job, but it's for folks with developmental disabilities, where they help like assemble different parts for manufacturers.
Well, the thing is that a guy could be nonverbal and they know the difference between real work and stupid busy work.
Yeah.
And I remember a really good behaviorist, she gave a talk and she said, don't make the person do something really dumb, like set and unset the table 10 times.
Right.
Because they're going to nobody does that. You teach them to set the table each time when you have the meal. And whatever he was doing in that workshop was real work for somebody. And they know the difference between real work and fake work.
Right. And he probably, and he's really brilliant. And I think we've had trouble finding programs or, working within the system to find things that are really
sometimes
engaging.
you got to think outside the box.
Yeah.
One thing I get asked all the time is about job interviews. Half of all good jobs for everybody are backdoor contacts. I just forget about the interviews, the back door. Now, if you have a skill like what I've got, the way I did an interview is I would just show off my work. All I did when I did an interview is I just put the drawings up there. There are my drawings.
Wow.
And I would show off my drawings and I'd show off pictures of jobs. Or you might have a math person show off their math, show off their programming. You see, they can just do a portfolio of work. That's the interview. The work sells itself. Now you have the more verbal kind of person with autism who thinks in words. They might be very good at specialized retail, like auto parts store, selling cars, sporting goods, where they have knowledge of all the merchandise. On the fully verbal end of the scale, there's 3 kinds of ways they think, and I discussed that in the autistic brain. There is the object visual. So like me, who thinks in pictures, totally thinks in pictures. Can't do algebra, still can't do algebra. That's keeping a lot of people out of skilled trades right now. We got plants falling down right now because people don't know how to fix them. Then you have the mathematical mind. That is your Silicon Valley programmer. The math, so you see the kind of a picture mind, a math mind, and these skills are often going to be very uneven. So if you got a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old who likes math, well, give them harder math. Probably going to need some special ed in reading. Then you have the verbal guy that loves history, loves facts. They're the one that might be good at specialized retail. And there's scientific research shows these different minds exist. Now, I'll address Ian Bonnie's chat here. She's gotten into graduate school. She's how's she going to succeed when she's autistic? Try to get diagnosed. First of all, I wouldn't even worry about the diagnosis. Read the books. You'll know. You'll know. It's not rocket science. It just is not. It's a behavioral profile. And now, knowing that you have autism, I'm finding what a lot of people holds them back on the job front. But on the relationship front, that's where it can make a difference. It'll give you insight. And you might want to look at a book that I edited called Different, Not Less. It's 16 older people on the spectrum learn later in life they're autistic. They write about their experiences, and relationships is where it helped. Okay, now advice on succeeding at the graduate level. My first advice is you fail a quiz in a class, your first quiz, let's say you mess up the statistics class. That was what I did. I messed up I had to be tutored. I got a C in statistics. You mess up that first statistics quiz, you ask for help. Ask for help if you get in trouble in a class. Maybe not take a full load. But the big mistake where students wreck their career is they don't get tutoring or help quickly enough. And then they're failing a course. I've been around for a long time. That's a number 1 piece of advice. Ask for help. And there was no counseling department or anything like that for me to go to. The math teacher tutored me in the small college I went to. Another graduate student tutored me in my master's, and I paid for a tutor. I hired a tutor when I had to get through my PhD statistics. And then for somebody else that might be really good at statistics, maybe it's some other class, but so I wouldn't get that worried about the evaluations. And where I have gotten the most valuable information from my life has been reading first person reports from people on the spectrum and getting deep into the biological literature, the brain sciences, which I do in here. There are differences in the brain. And one of the problems is that you have a big memory, but you're accessing it through a small processor. So a lot of social stuff goes by really fast. I can't shift attention fast enough. Friends through shared interests. You also have to have some time off, where you can chill out. But don't let the evaluation, you probably are on the spectrum. You read enough stuff, you'll know.
Yeah,
You'll know.
This is Ian. I've been reading about autism for years now, and I've had several adult friends with autism who have been diagnosed, and they just pointed out right away. It comes up with a lot of my therapists and stuff, but they're not skilled enough to do the full evaluation, and then
It's
it
overrated.
it gets murky because I'm in a wheelchair too. So they're like, we don't know if it's the CP or if it's autism, but that tends to co-occur with my neurological condition a lot. There's a statistically higher incidence of autism in people with CP than people without it.
Well, the CP is a lot. That's straightforward to diagnose, but kind of some of the kind of things in autism, like you might have problems with face recognition.
Oh, yep, I definitely do.
That's an autistic trait, very scientifically verified. The other problem is I can't remember long strings of verbal instructions. I can't do that. I have to write down the sequence. I cannot remember it. The worst job for me would be McDonald's takeout window, and I got to remember 8 meals if I'm a waitress, then balance plates on my arm. Forget it.
Oh yes, with that much, I would have to write it down. I can remember class.
That's a trait. Some people get rigid in their thinking, but you can get less rigid if as you learn more experiences. You see, I'm a bottom-up thinker. Okay, let's say I learn a concept like good and bad. I have to have specific examples of degrees of goodness and degrees of badness. Okay, if I stole an apple from the supermarket, that's not robbing a bank.
Mm-hmm.
And robbing a bank is not killing somebody. You see, I can put things into degrees of badness. You see, enough, those would be just 3 examples right there.
Yeah, I also have the sensitivity to noise thing where even the noise of traffic and sudden or high-pitched noises is like being stabbed in the ear with a knife made of air.
Well, I know that's an autistic trait right there. And then head injuries also get some of these same sensory problems. So that's some of the traits. And not picking up, some subtle social cues. That's a trait. But the thing is, I'm more interested in what can I do to help you to be successful. You're a psych major right now, and you see, I as a visual thinker, I'm going, okay, now what skills have you got?
Writing.
You're good at talking. Probably you're really good at talking.
Reading and writing and talking, yeah.
And writing. Well, there's a lot of things you can do. I like what Stephen Hawking says about disability. Concentrate on the things your disability doesn't prevent you from doing well. That was in the New York Times. And he could do math in his head really well, and he could float around in NASA's weightless plane really well. And that's about it. But he did math in his head really well.
Yeah.
You see, there's too much emphasis on the thing they can't do. So work on the things where, writing and stuff with talking.
That is part of the reason why I'm going to graduate school at UNC to go work for the Colorado Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, because I watched an interview the director did, and they are all about, getting the youths with disabilities that are in their basement playing video games all day.
It's ridiculous.
They're all about getting them out and into the workforce.
Well,
doing whatever they can to.
there's this person I call Willy Wonka. I can't tell you where he is. I signed a draconian non-disclosure agreement, but he has a stainless steel Willy Wonka factory. And only 2 years ago, I sat down with him and we discussed all of the diagnoses he would have been: oppositional defiant, autistic, dyslexic, rotten student, you name it. And I came from a low income background, I went and worked in a food factory and washed the equipment. Then he started maintaining it. Then he built it. He's got gazillions of patents. He's got a multi-million-dollar company. I got on his private jet and they flew me to stainless steel wonderland. And it's in the US, that's all I can say. I can't tell you where that jet went. And he is on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Undiagnosed officially. The guy's kind of weird. There's another guy I worked with. He sells stuff to the cattle industry. Stutterer, dyslexic, ADHD, took welding, rotten student. Started making things and selling them. And you know what? We're losing these skills. Right now in the poultry industry, a brand new poultry processing plant was just built and all the equipment was imported from Holland because we don't make it anymore. There's a connection here.
Yeah.
The special ed department builds the stuff, what I call the clever engineering department. And these kids are in the basement playing video games and they're never introduced to tools. Now some kids, college is the right place to go, but there's other kids where these people own businesses.
Oh yeah.
Big businesses.
And DVR works a lot with the trades too.
Good.
So
Good. Because,
yeah.
but the thing is, kids need to be introduced to tools young. We've got 16-year-olds playing with Legos. We got 16-year-olds that are fully verbal, that don't know how to shop. And then when I suggest to the parents that you ought to go into the store and buy some printer paper, the mom starts crying and saying she can't let go. And I just go, really? Printer paper? Really? You're going to cry over your kid buying printer paper?
Yeah, I had my
I mean,
fair
it's too
share
much
that
of a,
growing up, too.
can't do anything mentality. See, I'm a visual thinker and I'm bottom up and I'm very thinking specific. We've got to, okay, let's say you're in a wheelchair and just the top and only the bottom half doesn't work. Wheelchair accessible building. You can do any job that this half can do in an office. The other thing I think is a problem in disability is the lumping together of a wheelchair user. I had a blind roommate when I was at graduate school, a deaf person, and you're just lumping all these things together and they have very different needs. And I've worked with a lot of big corporations and I went to a seminar about 2 years ago that really made me sick. A really articulate young blind man, and he'd been turned down from like 20 customer service call center jobs, totally qualified for it. And I think what happens is the HR person panics and they think that the accommodations are going to be too difficult. I've worked on the corporate side of stuff. I know how they think. I've sat in the conference room in the upper levels of the corporate tower, been there, and they panic. And I think the way he should have been prepared to go into these interviews and they go, yeah, you see my dog now, you're freaking out. You find it to be just too hard to do the accommodation. Well, I want to give you a free trial. I only need one accommodation. That's all I need. I need the special software put on the computer. And it's not going to wreck your computer system. And my friend will come in for 3 days. My dog's got to learn the office. Just give me I'll give you a 2-week free trial. I think if you went in there with that attitude, you would have gotten a job.
That's very similar to how I plan to approach it myself.
Good.
May I ask you a question, please?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm curious, I imagine quite a few people on the higher functioning end of autism, fully verbal, would like to not be identified as autistic because they don't want to be perceived as not being able to do anything. They want to avoid negative stereotypes. Do you think that affects our overall perception of autism? Like, do you think it sort of sways people towards thinking of it as more of a debilitating outcome?
There's a lot of discrimination out there. Well, I never disclosed to the cattle industry. Of course, they know now because of the movie, but all through the 70s and the 80s, I never disclosed. Now, I would say things to people like, let me just make myself a little checklist of how to do this, or let me just write some stuff down. yeah, things like that I would disclose. You know, and there's it's because there's been some bad stuff where people have been discriminated against and lost jobs when they disclose. The military, I got an email up right now. I got an answer from a soldier who's had a very successful career in the military, and he did not disclose. Another guy disclosed, and the military wouldn't touch him. Another guy in the last 5 years here in Colorado, which is really disgusting, passed his flight school, went for his physical, made the mistake of disclosing, flunked his physical, and never got his pilot's license. That's ugly, and that happened relatively recently. You see, these are some of the things that, you know, that's still going on. Now, I've certainly been to that airport, and I've looked at some of these young pilots. You know, the one that wants to be the fighter pilot flying the commuter jet. I've been on his flight. And I couldn't believe this one flight. He was right up the butt of this other big airplane on this small commuter jet. And I knew he was going to do something to be a hot shot. We turned to take off, and he takes off really fast, and then he banked it like this. He did a little fighter jet thing. I knew he was going to do it, and I was laughing. He wished it was a fighter jet. It wasn't. Well, one of the things, let's look at some of the things I'm working with people with autism. Surprises scare. It's not a good idea for them to come in and find the office under construction, and they weren't warned about that. Yep, surprises scare. If there's going to be a change in a boss or something like that, if it can not be a surprise. The other thing is they need really clear directions. Let's say you have a programmer working for you and he's on the autism spectrum. Don't just say design new software. Give them very specific projects with a deadline. And like when I worked for the magazine, I had to do a certain amount of column inches every month and cover, there were certain meetings I had to cover and shows I had to cover. And then I was free to do some features.
Do you think there's a way we could change the perception of autism in general? Because I mean, we see clearly that there's quite a few people that are doing very important things in industry that are on the autism spectrum, but there's such a negative stereotype around autism in the US specifically. Is there any way to change that?
Well, there's one of the things I made, my biggest barrier when I started in the 70s was being a woman. That was a gigantic barrier. I got kicked out of a lot of stuff that's shown in the movie, and it's accurate. And where I got most of the trouble wasn't the big owners of the feed yards, it was middle management. Middle management was about where all my trouble was. That was a big problem. Okay, Rachel's asking about the antidepressants. The problem with when you use antidepressants to treat anxiety, if you jack those doses up, you get agitation. I don't care. And then when I read the scientific literature, I get really mad because they don't seem to get it. And they'll talk about adverse side effects. Well, I can tell you what's causing those side effects. It's too high a dose. It's that simple. If I've had 100 parents tell me, oh, low dose of Prozac worked fine. We double the dose and it was horrible. He won't sleep and he was like going around crazy and agitated. No, it doesn't work. Throw the label away. And I think part of the problem is the verbal thinkers, they get, I'm discovering more and more and working on this book on visual thinking, just how different, okay, Betsy, my fabulous co-author, our skills complement each other. But I made a little table on how Gardner's different intelligences differed from some of the ways I look at it. Ugh, she said a table, ugh, let's glaze over. Where I thought it would be helpful. Most people, it would be helpful. Little simple little table. She hated it. You know, I'm learning more and more. My approach to industrial things is different. Like I found out there's an ingredient, that there's a shortage of an ingredient for making some of these vaccines. Well, I'm going to be right on it. Like if someone put me in charge of this, says, all right, what is this ingredient? Where do they make it? What is it? How can we source this stuff? Because if I don't have this one ingredient, I can't make the vaccine. but I can't fix the problem if I don't know what it is. But I do know there's an ingredient that's hard to get. What got me into neuroscience? Well, I've been doing a lot. You can read about all the different brain scan experiments I did in here. Well, wanted to figure out what made my brain tick. It's a journey to the center of my mind. I found I have a huge visual thinking circuit. I find I've got a big thing of water right where working memory is. Journey to the center of my mind. Most of the things that showed up in my brain showed up clinically. All of the brain scans I've done, they're not commercially available. They were basically scientists having fun with the latest scanner. In fact, I'm kind of shocked that the high definition tensor imaging, Walter Snyder at the University of Pittsburgh, that didn't cause more interest. There wasn't that much interest in it. But what I'm interested in is taking the brains that have different skills, have skills that complement each other. Let's take Zoom, for example. If a programmer makes the interface, nobody can figure out how to use it. And the guy that made Zoom used to work for WebEx, and I just hate WebEx. WebEx wouldn't listen to him, so he started his own company. And the reason why Zoom took over, because I don't have to learn how to use it. You know what? I don't really want to learn how to use it. I'm not interested in that. And then I go do a conference and I got to spend half an hour on some stupid, awful platform to learn how to use something that's really awful. Well, the visual thinker is going to make the interface. And the mathematical mind programs it and makes it work. Steve Jobs, the artist, made the user interface on the iPhone. The mathematicians made it work. That's different kinds of minds working together. You need both, and both are really important. All right, maybe I just got to pick somebody. Should I go down in the, all right, how about Zane?
Yeah, I was really curious. My question was about your decision to pursue a PhD in neuroscience, but you kind of answered that already.
Yeah, I think I kind of answered that.
Yeah.
Well, I was interested in, learning about the brain, and I was a psych major originally, and I was fascinated with optical illusions. And that helped me with some of my work with cattle, because I wanted to look at what they were looking at, and they was afraid of a shadow or a reflection. So that's sort of doing interdisciplinary. Well, I still think in pictures. That hasn't changed. And the HBO movie accurately shows how I think in pictures. That's one of the most accurate parts of the movie. It also shows all my projects accurately. All the projects in that movie I actually did. Still thinking pictures. And then it took me a long time to discover that other people did not think in pictures. And it was a shock to me, trying to find a little prop I have here. Well, I'll just make another one here on a piece of printer paper. If you say to me, think about a church steeple, how does it come into my mind? I see specific ones, and I'll start naming them off, like where they're located. I'll name them off. They come up like a series of PowerPoint slides. But I asked the speech therapist one day, think about church steeples, and this is all she saw. Just a pointy thing. And I'm going, oh, wow, that is a different kind of thinking. That was a shock. I was in my late 30s when I did that. I thought when I was in the 20s, I thought everyone thought in pictures. I didn't know my thinking was different. But this was an absolute shock. And another speech therapist I asked only heard the bell. You see, that's why they became speech therapists, because that's a highly verbal profession. Absolute shock to me. And I'm learning even more as I'm working on this book, just how different the way to do problem solving is. Verbal thinkers overgeneralize, like putting all the disabilities together. You know, where I tend to like, okay, the power went off on Texas, every form of power failed. Well, the first thing I want to do is take a map of the whole grid. It'll tell me what froze. I don't have to know how a power plant works. All I have to know is if it doesn't have fuel, it doesn't run. And that was the problem. No fuel, no run, no electricity. So was it the compressor station that went down? Maybe that needs a backup generator. This other thing froze. And I just see it. Now you see that kind of people you need. It's just unbelievable. It wasn't even that cold. It didn't even get down to zero. And you froze up every kind of power equipment you had. Unbelievable. Yeah, you need someone with a little bit of autism that would go, hey, if we don't put a generator on this, we're going to be in trouble. Or if we don't insulate this, we're going to be in trouble. I've had ice storms before in Texas. I remember a really nasty time out at the Dallas airport about 20 years ago. They had ice that thick on the taxiway. All right, we're going to pick somebody else. All right, how about Hallie J? Hallie J there? Oh, somebody's got the name of Sick.
Hi, sorry.
Okay.
I'm here. So actually, I don't major in psychology or sociology.
I can't hear you. You need to get up close to your mic.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay, now I can.
Hi. So I actually don't major in psych or sociology. I'm doing wildlife biology, and my friend who is in a psych major recommended this for me. So I don't have very many questions about the autism, but I am learning a lot from this.
Well, you might want to come on my livestock handling class next semester.
I would love to.
Why
Yeah,
don't
that would
you
be
sign
awesome.
up for it? It should be the first half of the semester. We're just finishing it up now. It's just half the semester, Tuesday afternoons. You also might like my book, Animals in Translation, or Animals Make Us Human. You might find those books interesting, and I've got lots of stuff on Grandin.com. That's my my livestock webpage. In fact, I worked with Nancy Earlbeck. She was formerly a nutritionist here at CSU, and we trained antelopes to cooperate with getting blood sampling, voluntarily getting blood sampling. And no one thought that we could train an animal that flighty to stand still while you took a blood sample out of its back leg, but we did it.
Yeah, your work with psychology and animals is just, it's so inspiring. And I think it's really important, especially with wildlife stuff, like making the animals comfortable and calm to be safer for them and for us. Like it's so inspiring.
You know, I think of Animals in Translation and Animals Make Us Human. This is Animals in Translation right here. I think you might find this book really interesting.
Definitely, I will definitely check
Animals
it
in
out.
Translation, and then Animals Make Us Human. This is an interesting book. And another book I really like in wildlife is this one here, Out on a Limb. It's not my book. This is a guy who's rehabilitated bears to live out in the wild. And the thing that's interesting is they live in both worlds.
Yeah.
They live in both worlds successfully. Really innovative comment. Out on a Limb by Benjamin Kilham.
That's
Dr.
incredible.
Grant,
Okay, here, okay, let's talk about nonverbal adults. Let's discuss that some. First of all, let's see if we can teach them to type. And there's some that type independently. We're not touching them. I don't want to get into facilitated communication controversy, but Tito Makapadehe types completely independently. And he describes a sensory disordered world. Then there's The Reason I Jump, that New York Times bestseller. But the best book is the sequel to it. The sequel's a better book because he's older and he has a lot more insight. And then there's Carly's Voice. Now, they describe problems with not being able to control movement, sensory jumbling, like a really bad cable TV or bad satellite dish is getting rained on and shaking, and the picture's pixelating. Some of them learn to type. Now, here's a little tip working with like severely nonverbal adults for their schedule. They're very, very slow processing speed, very, very slow. So what they did at this one group home, I thought this was so clever, is like 5 minutes before it's time to take a shower, they gave them a washcloth to hold. 5 minutes before breakfast, they gave them a spoon to hold. 5 minutes before they get on the bus, they gave them a toy bus to hold. They called it a touch schedule. So you gave them the item for the schedule to hold 5 minutes beforehand. And they found that that stopped a whole pile of meltdowns. Because that if you give it to them 5 minutes beforehand, then they have time to process it. So that's you know, and then sensory problems can really be an issue. That we tend to underestimate them. I remember one time going out to therapeutic riding, and we were getting the horse ready, and I just motioned to him like this and to close the stall door, and he did it. You know, sometimes we underestimate them. The other thing I find with little kids, people just can't stop saying good job. And I found that I went out to the therapeutic riding center, this urge to always say good job, good job, good job. I had to fight that urge because it kind of breaks up the flow of what you're doing. And I remember one little girl, she was nonverbal, maybe about 5, and she was on a horse, and the OT was trying to get her to throw a ball at a traffic cone or something like that. And she got mad and she just threw it. And I ran after it and I just talked to her like a normal kid. I said, you chucked it. I can't get it if you just chuck it. And I went back and I said, no, I'm going to smile at her. So now I'm going to toss you the ball and you're going to toss it back to me really nice. And she did. I just expected her to do it. And it was quiet. But when you say good job constantly, it breaks up the flow. And I found myself fighting not to say it. I had the urge to say it all the time. Okay, let's say maybe we pick somebody out here that's all right, who should I pick out?
Dr. Grandin, there was a question in the chat asking about your opinions on the topic of vaccines causing autism.
Well, there's certain topics that get turned into such a hot potato that I tend to run the other way and drop it. I can tell you, as far as COVID vaccines go, I got mine and I'm really, really happy about it. And autism is mainly genetic, mainly. You can look it up on the Google Scholar. I'm going to just stay out of that.
Definitely. And there's also another
Because
question.
there's some things where the potato gets so hot that a rational discussion is not possible.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I drop it.
I think that's a good point. There's also another question in the chat asking about the best way to explain to neurotypical people who don't know much about autism how to approach those who have autism.
Well, the sudden surprises, scare. Okay, the person may not have eye contact. See, part of the problem with the eye contact I find when I'm tired is that it's forcing me to use 2 sensory channels at the same time. That overloads that little processor I got. See, a lot of problems go back to having that little tiny processor. So I'm a Intel 286 with the cloud for memory. Now, having a small processor doesn't affect a job like computer programming or designing things because there's no multitasking. There's some social circuits that aren't hooked up. Another thing is, as I said before, a brain can be more cognitive and thinking, or a brain can be more social emotional. Well, the autistic person, I get all geeking out about Perseverance landing on Mars and looking at those beautiful photos of the parachute. That rover weighs a ton. And it came down on cables like the sky crane. And then I'm looking at it and I'm going, somebody in a shop made all the parts for that. Probably some Spectrum, and they're not getting enough credit for it. Now, NASA did have a nice article on a guy who made some special rings. I think it was for camera mount on one of the earlier rovers. Spent 2 months doing it. Yeah, but if you don't have these parts, it doesn't work.
Thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead and ask your question. Yeah.
I also work with children with autism right now at a center, and I find myself holding back saying good job as well, even though I really do think they're doing a great job. But
you know, the problem is it breaks the flow of the activity. Because what I did with this little girl, I was amazed. I couldn't believe how well it worked. She chucked this ball kind of mad. She was sitting on the horse. And I just said, I ran after her. I said, you chucked it. How am I going to get it? So then I turned around and I had the ball and I smiled at her and I said, I'm going to throw the ball to you. You're going to catch it. And then you're going to toss it back to me. And she did.
so
Now, if I had said good job, right when she caught it, I would have broken the flow on her tossing it back to me.
So holding.
I'm not going to, now maybe I could say good job after I got the ball caught. We kind of finished it. But if you do that in the middle, let's say she caught it and then I said good job, it breaks the flow on her throwing it back.
So hold praise until the entire task.
Yeah, that's right. You know, and this is where the good teacher kind of has the knack of just, you know, how to do this. I remember watching a lady, she worked as a service dog trainer. She was working a kid at one of the airports right at a gate. Couldn't believe how she worked with a kid. It was just amazing. Yeah. You know, just how getting them engaged, getting them to engage with you. Little turn taking games, little fun things.
Awesome. You all have some amazing questions, and I think we're about out of time.
No, I can stay a little longer if people want.
Okay, yeah. If you have any other questions, anyone, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask now.
Well, maybe I'll pick somebody else here. How about Legia? Maybe I hope I didn't say that wrong.
Okay, yep. Okay. I just have a question because I'm from China. So
okay.
I feel like autism in China or even in like Asian countries are like, how to describe it is like people hold very terrible stereotypes about autism. So I'm just curious, like, what's your opinions about like how to like motivate or inspire the public to get into like autism more in Asian countries?
Well, I think part of the problem is a lot of the people, the fully verbal with no speech delay, they're already in computer programming. And when I went out to the tech companies in Silicon Valley, I noticed that they really avoid the labels. Half those programmers are on the spectrum. So what's probably happening in China is the smart math programmers, they're just going into programming. And so you're probably getting the more severe end of the spectrum. See, this is the problem. It's such a big spectrum and as a true continuous trait. But I think the best thing is showing what they can do. So when I was started in my 20s, everybody thought it was stupid. And when I did that project that was shown in the movie with the dip vats, one of the big motivations for me was I wanted to prove I was not stupid. That was a very, very big motivation, that I could do things.
Yeah, thank you. Because I feel like in our culture, in our society, like people just feel like, okay, like I understand like you are different, but people just don't receive or like they just don't like, okay, just give me some chance to like approve I can do it, because people just, you know, there is not too many opportunities for them to do so. And yeah, like anything I know about autism in China is like I know our society, our media really want to like portray those children like they're really good at like drawings, arts, but like I feel like there's just not too many things to be covered, like to give them some opportunities or even to give them some like education. So yeah, definitely I think that's a really good topics.
Well, I always like to talk about famous scientists that are probably on the spectrum. You know, Thomas Edison, Michelangelo was probably on the spectrum. You know, a lot of the mathematicians, brilliant mathematicians, were probably on the spectrum. You see, and then I've been, it's, you know, you get some of the greatest technology. You know, I've been out to all the NASA places. We've discussed it there, and man, the special ed department's building the stuff. Like a guy with Tourette's is doing a launch pad, and somebody else is dyslexic in designing stuff. And the thing that I found that, you know, really helped me was showing the work. And then you do the same thing with programming. Let's say you've got somebody who's good at computer programming. Well, you show off some of the code. It's you see, I have emotions, but I get emotional about stuff like Perseverance landing on Mars. That's the kind of stuff I get emotional. Like when I went to visit Cape Kennedy and I went inside the vehicle assembly building, that's like one of the greatest things my generation did. And the vehicle assembly building is definitely my generation now. Now they just tilted up the hydraulic thing. My generation had to do it more cumbersome way. But that, you know, we went to the moon with extremely crude equipment, with a spacesuit made by a bra company. I'm not kidding. Playtex won the bid for the spacesuit for the moon. And a computer the size of a suitcase that didn't even have a calculator's worth of memory. Pretty amazing stuff. And I get very emotional about that because I am what I do. You know, okay, to pull off a project like going to the moon, you had to have an awful lot of people that care about what they do. And I remember I did one this fabulous 2.5-day trip to Cape Kennedy. That's the best fun I ever had, but it was very, very emotional. Well, now the thing with some of the stimuli stuff, if you get kids out and where they have some control of stimuli, they can sometimes get to tolerate it a bit more. Where they have control. One of the mistakes made with headphones is to wear them all the time, and then your ear gets more sensitive. It's going to make the sound sensitivity worse if you wear the earphones all the time. It's okay to have them with you. Have them with you. That gives you control. Try not to wear them. Now you hear Emily's talking about her sister diagnosed with autism and struggling. Now this is an example of a question that's too vague. I don't know her age and what is the problem. I don't have enough information there with that question from Emily Lundquist. Am I dealing with a 3-year-old here or somebody in their teens? She's 16, and what kind of struggles is she having right now? Noise sensitivity, yeah, that can be a really big problem. You know, my top area for research would be sensory problems because they can be really debilitating. And there's a treatment that might work for some people. It's called environmental enrichment. Is an effective treatment for autism. And it's described in this book, the way I see it. It's my most basic book on autism. The way I see it, a lot of little short chapters. And what they do in environmental enrichment is you stimulate 2 senses at the same time. One of them is almost always touch or smell. So you might hold a cold water glass and touch a carpet sample, or smell an aromatherapy and play some classical music. And this evidence-based. It's called environmental enrichment. Is an effective treatment for autism. It's an adjunct to other therapies. And one of the problems in social situations is with a noise sensitivity, and I still have this problem, I can't hear in a noisy situation. So it makes social situations not very fun when I cannot hear conversations. Yeah, that can be a problem. Okay, let's how about Rose Gallagher?
You spoke earlier about how you didn't think the diagnosis was as important to get in the sense that it could stop you from getting jobs and stuff when you're younger. What about those older people that are older in life? Would it be able to help them at all to have that diagnosis as they go into golden years?
Yes, it can. It can especially help in relationships. And that, that's where you might want to look at the book, The Different Not Less, because that's 18 people in their own words explaining their experience, childhood, employment, and relationships. And there were people that got diagnosed later in life. And that was helpful. Yeah, you see, that's where it can give insight. You know, because then maybe the spouse is not very demonstrative. It's like I've got emotions, but I'm geeking out over perseverance because it's just so cool. And you look at something like perseverance, the mathematicians got it there, but there's probably some autistic and dyslexics down in this shop that built crucial parts of that thing. I mean, somebody had to make its wheels. Look at its wheels. Somebody had to make those. It's a one-of-a-kind machine. Okay, how about Sicily there?
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So one of the things I'm really interested in studying, I'm a psychology student, but one of the things I really love is substance use and substance abuse disorders. Do you see any kind of relationship or comorbidity with autism disorder at all?
Well, that probably is. Let me tell you, there's genetics on them. I worked in construction, and we worked with people that, you know, were former inmates. And some people can sell drugs, take them, and not get addicted. There's other people that touch them, and they're instantly addicted. There are genetic differences. This is based on 25 years in heavy construction. I've been in a lot of places. And there's certain people that should not be touching alcohol or drugs. It will wreck their life. And there's others, they can use some of the stuff and it doesn't wreck their life. And then the new synthetic stuff is more awful. Yeah, there are definitely some people instantly get addicted. Others sell the stuff. Might take a little bit of it, don't get addicted.
Right. Thank you.
And then you get into whether you should use a substitute opioid. I would rather do abstinence, but why are you getting so hung up on it? If I could use a substitute, let's say I tried abstinence, doesn't work. Some it doesn't work. A substitute opioid, I can get them back in their job. You see, people get too, okay, we just got to do abstinence, or you never use a drug. And then there's others where you're going to have to use a drug. I'm interested in getting them functional. Now, if I can get them off with abstinence, that'd be great. But there's some you can't. And this is where people get real rigid in their thinking. No, and I've read some of that research. Oh, maybe I'm going to just pick somebody else here. Let's see. Who should I pick? Well, let's see. How about Ian Bonine?
Oh, me again. Hello.
Yeah.
Um, oh no, my mind just went blank. I will think of something. Let's
Well,
see.
then maybe I'll pick out
Come
somebody
back
else.
to me.
Maybe I'll pick out Chloe. How about Chloe? Hi.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
So I actually have COVID, so I'm pretty tired and not thinking of much, but I've really appreciated listening. I watched your documentary in middle school and it really inspired me. Now I'm a psychology major and wanting to become an occupational therapist.
Okay, well,
So
good.
I'm really glad. Yeah, I'm very inspired by your work. So I'm glad
Well,
I
thank you, and I
got
hope
to
you get
listen
over
in today.
COVID soon. You getting
Yeah, me
over
too.
it? You just starting to get it, or you're getting over it?
I just went into quarantine yesterday, so I'm only on like day 3 of like symptoms, but it's not terrible. So
Well, you'll probably get over it. Most young people do. It's our
yeah, I think
old
so.
people like me, they have to worry about it. And I just got my second shot and I'm super happy about it.
Good. I'm glad you got the shots.
Well, the thing is, the data is very clear. The older you are, it's like okay, this regression line in statistics by age, by dead, that's like 78% of all the dead people with COVID in Colorado are over 70. That's the statistic. All right, how about Jenna?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much. And hi, Carla. So I have like a lot of different questions, but one that I really wonder about is what do you think of the way that the media depicts autism in like film and in different things like that, like TV shows?
Well, I think the original Rain Man, that only showed a particular savant type autism. That's not all of them. I think my movie did a good job. That was 10 years ago. Then there's that Good Doctor show. Thing I noticed about that is the guy doesn't seem to learn. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that helped me is I had, there were some good people in the industry that mentored me. And they just told me how to behave. I criticized welding on my first job and I said, look like pigeon do. The plant engineer pulled me into his office quietly, told me that I had to apologize for that kind of rude talk. And he told me what to do. He was a perfect job coach. Old Swift plant engineer, probably the early 60s, late 50s, something like that. Told me quietly what I should do. I think it's good that, they're depicting these things. I thought Claire Danes, she channeled me. She got I gave her all these ancient VHS tapes and she played them over and over and over again, and with a speech coach and a movement coach.
Wow.
And she did a really good job. I mean, I think it's good that it's getting shown more, and companies like Microsoft are starting to reach out. There's some good things that are happening. The thing that's a problem with a lot of activism is it's way too generalized. In the work that I did with the meat plants, I mean, I was working with meat plants, not the whole world, meat plants in the US. That's not the whole world. It's something much more targeted. And then the opportunity came up to implement the McDonald's audits. It changed more stuff in 6 months than I'd seen in a 25-year career prior to that. But a lot of stuff, it's way too generalized. Try to find, something more targeted. Like taking autistic kids that are good at math and building up their math and getting them jobs in Silicon Valley and then writing about it. The other thing I did, I wrote about my cattle stuff. And as I look back on my career, writing was really important. There's really good teachers out there and they don't write anything about how they do it. And I wrote all these how-to cattle things. That's another thing that helped. So you write about stuff, how to do it.
Thank you.
Did I help on the work with space travel? No, I didn't. I just geeked out on it. I've been to all the NASA places and I've given talks on autism and on different kinds of minds. I talk about the visual thinkers, the math thinkers, and the word thinkers. And you take on NASA, for example, you've got the designers of the spacesuit. There were 4 seamstresses that sewed it that worked for Playtex, the bra company, serious. Visual thinkers probably designed that. And then there was a weird algebra guy at MIT who did the equations. And if we hadn't had his equations, the lunar lander could have crashed. Now, he admits he didn't do any of the work, but his equations were essential. So this tiny little memory of this computer in this suitcase could have a computer crash, recover, and they still landed the lunar lander. You know, so that's the math mind work, you know, and the visual thinkers for years didn't let anybody know that Playtex made the spacesuit. LPC, International Latex Corporation, didn't let anybody know what that stood for. But if the suit hadn't worked, what would have happened to the astronaut? It would have been horrible. It's amazing what they did and with the stuff that was so primitive compared to what we have now for electronics. Just amazing. And I had a chance to Atlanta Airport had a moon suit on display in a glass case, and I was able to get like this close to it and look at the stitching, and I'm going, somebody sewed that by hand. And now I've read about the ladies now that sewed it, and one of them cried every night because she was so scared that she'd sew something wrong. It was such a responsibility to be sewing the moon suit. Now I get choked up about that. This is the kind of stuff I get emotional about. And they finally got the recognition that they deserve. And then people like Katherine Johnson, the black lady, the mathematician, she finally got, she's like 90 some years old and finally got recognition for the mathematics that they did to do the orbital reentry and the orbital paths before they had computers. They calculated it by hand. Okay, we got 2 new messages here. What specific classes do I teach? I teach livestock handling. That's my class. It's a short course, goes for about 7 or 8 Tuesday afternoons. You learn a lot about cattle behavior. You have to draw a scale drawing. And then I have an internet project where you pick out a subject in animal behavior that really interests you. And it can be any animal. And you have to look up articles online and summarize them because I want you to learn how to use the databases. We've got about 1/3 of the students don't know how to use databases at all. And that's not good. And that's a skill that they can use after they leave CSU. No, I didn't help with the space travel. I couldn't do the math. I wanted to work on that stuff. I took a biomedical engineering course. I had to drop it. And
Dr. Grandin,
design the spacesuits did all that much math. Now the people that do the orbital stuff, that's pure math.
there is a question. It was a long time ago in the chat, so I think it went by fast, and I'm not sure that it was answered. And that was how to deal with, I'm looking for it now, but there was a question about, here it is. Do you have advice on how to help nonverbal or minimally verbal adults with autism cope with grief?
Okay, well, that's a good one. Yeah, the person's gone. Are they going to
I'm here.
That the person
Still here.
Still here.
Uh-huh.
In other words, to get them to understand that the person is gone.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant the person who asked. I'll mute myself.
Me too.
Yeah, they may not understand the concept that the person's not coming back. Well, that can be difficult. It depends how well they understand stuff when you tell them. But it's better just to say they're not coming back. Don't tell them they've gone to sleep. That's a gigantic mistake. They're gone. And they're not going to come back. The other thing, I get asked a lot about religion. Let's keep it positive. Let's keep things positive. Like you get these little bracelets, say, what would Jesus do? Okay, for getting kids to do good deeds. Let's teach the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And we got another message here. Let's see what that is. Well, splinter skills. I get a little annoyed when this stuff's just called splinter skills. Especially if it's somebody that's doing high level programming, and that's called a splinter skill. And you can take these things and you can broaden it. When I was 8 years old, I would just draw the same horse head over and over again. And my mother would encourage me to draw the entire horse, draw the saddle, draw the stable. In other words, take it and broaden it. Take that and broaden it. And we've got to figure out what people can do. Think about Stephen Hawking. He could do math in his head, and writing was very laborious and difficult. I think he used eye tracking software. You know, there's way too much medical model, because you see, you get in the mild forms of autism, I think it's just a personality variant in the real mild forms. And the thing that's interesting is you take the genes out to make autism, probably won't grow a very big brain. It isn't simple genetics like finding out that women metabolize warfarin is different, and take too much of that stuff for blood thinner. It is rat poison. You know, that was simple genetics. That popped right out. I'm real glad to know about that. Well, not very talkative. Well, let's see now. How about Brian? You still there?
Dr. Grandin, I think, maybe one last question
Okay.
for you. I was curious what, to the extent, or let me think of how to word this, but how much of a hand did you have in the creation of the movie about your life?
I had a lot of discussions with the director, Mick Jackson, with Emily Gerson Sains, the producer. She was a mother of an autistic child. And they had to get the right team together to do that movie. You know, they had it took 10 years to put it together. They just couldn't get the right team. And then when Emily got the right team with Mick Jackson, Claire Danes, and Christopher Munger, the writer, it really took off. And I had a lot of input into making sure cattle stuff was accurate. I said, we can't have like City Slicker with that Holsteins on a Western ranch. Really now? Holstein beef cattle? I said, we can't have those kind of mistakes. The cattle was nice and accurate.
Well, Dr. Grandin, it's 5:30. We probably should.
That's just fine. That'll be just fine.
Respectful of your time.
Okay, well, it was good to talk to the club. I really, liked doing it, and maybe next time we'll be doing it in person.
Thank you so much for coming. We do hope to see you in person. We would love that.
One new message here. Let's see. One new message. What? Oh, thank you. Okay.
The thing. We're all very grateful that you spent the time with us that you did today. This has been fascinating, and we all learned new things. And so thank you very, very much.
It was really, really good to be here. Just great.